So I'm between you and alcohol or the rain, whichever you prefer. So yeah, we're going to talk about AI today. I'm going to give you hopefully a different way of thinking about AI compared to what you might have heard over the past few years. We'll also talk about how we can bring people and technology together to do interesting and amazing things. So I've been involved in AI for about 30 years. My undergraduate was in AI 27 years ago in UCL, just down the road. There were 2 people on my course. Things have changed a lot since then. I've continued an academic career where I continue to help academics spin out companies. I started a company or multiple companies over the past 20 years that have been building AI solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world. And I run AI across WPP. WPP give me a lot of rope. I've just started a company to solve machine consciousness. If we want to go very deep today, we can go very deep. Anyway, that's me. It's boring. Let's talk about AI. I guess for the past 10, 15 years, we've been telling companies to build data lakes, to put Tableau on top, and analytics layer. And the hope is that by extracting insights from data and giving those insights to human beings, that it will lead to better decisions. Giving human beings better insights doesn't typically lead to better decisions. Companies don't have insight problems, they've got decision-making problems. And that's a completely different field in computer science. If you're old enough, it used to be called operations research. Always start with the decision and work backwards. What tends to happen is we get very excited about emerging technologies. 10 years ago it was machine learning, now it's generative AI. We then apply those technologies to solving the wrong problem. We blame the technology when it goes wrong, but it's not the technology's fault. It's human beings not understanding what the right technologies are, solving the right problems. So it turns out that human beings are rubbish at making decisions. There are plenty of books out there that will convince you that we are not good at making decisions. We are bounded on our decision-making ability. This is one of them. Daniel Kahneman argues that we have a fast brain and a slow brain. There are parallels in terms of how our brains work with how AIs work, which I'll talk about later on. So I'm going to test your brains now. I know it's late in the day. I'm going to ask you some maths questions. Your job is to answer these maths questions as fast as possible. So first one, nice and easy. The combined price of a bat and a ball is £1.10. The bat is £1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? It's not 10 pence, you're not broken. The bat is £1.05. The ball is 5 pence. The combined price is £1.10. The bat is 1. So that's where you use your intuition, and you're confidently every day using your intuition to make the wrong decision. It's really important to understand what is it that humans are good at and what is it that AIs are good at. I've been using this slide for about 15 years, so forgive me if you've already seen it. Imagine you've got a delivery van, and your delivery van has to deliver packages around these 24 points. Humans are quite good at solving these spatial problems. After a few minutes, we'll draw a nice path around those points. How long will it take a computer to get the shortest path, the one that's going to save the most amount of time, petrol, energy? Seconds, milliseconds, somewhere between milliseconds and 20 billion years. If you put 24 times 23 times 20, 24 factorial, exclamation mark you learned at school, into a calculator, you get this number of roots. That's how many solutions there are around those 24 points. If you have a computer that could check 1 million roots a second, it would take 20 billion years to go through all of them and say, this one that I looked at that 10 billion years ago, this one's the shortest one, you should do that. If I had another point to the map, it becomes 25 times 20 billion years, or 5,000 billion years. If another point to the map, it becomes 26 times 5,000 billion years. These are exponential problems. They get ugly very quickly. One of my clients is Tesco. They're delivering to 200,000 points on the map a day, 200,000 factorial. The point here is if you choose the wrong algorithm, it will literally take longer than the age of the universe to solve that problem. If you choose the right algorithm, it will take milliseconds. That is the opportunity cost in choosing the wrong algorithms. Okay, if I build a system that I give data to and it makes a decision, and tomorrow I give it the same data, it makes the same decision, what we have is automation. And automation is amazing because we can get computers to do things better than human beings. But does anybody know the definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different answer. I would controversially argue that by definition, automation is stupid. It's not AI. I know that everybody that currently touches these big words calls themselves an AI company. It's fine. We get more clients. We get more funding. There are unfortunately many definitions of AI. The most popular definition is by far the weakest definition, which is getting computers to do things that humans can do. And the reason why it's a popular definition is for most people, AI started 3 years ago with ChatGPT being able to correspond in natural language and recognize objects and images. And when we get machines to behave like humans, because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. And again, there are plenty of books out there that will convince you that we are not that intelligent. That's a different conversation. There's a much better definition of AI. It comes from a definition from the 1980s, which is goal-directed adaptive behavior. It's a beautiful definition. What you want to do is build systems that make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. And if I was being controversial, but honest with you all, if I held what we do in industry to this definition, one might argue that nobody's doing AI. So of course, it's a ridiculous comment because we're all doing AI. But the point is that what you want to do is build systems that can safely adapt themselves in production, that constantly get better. And by the way, that's very hard. I actually don't like thinking of AI through definitions. I don't like thinking of AI through technology. So I'm going to give you a different framework. Before I do, a little bit of a history lesson. This is AI in the 60s and 70s. It's Socrates. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. If I say to you that Socrates is a man, and that all men are mortal, I can infer new knowledge. I can infer that Socrates is mortal. AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of things that we know about the world to try to infer new knowledge to build smarter systems. Didn't really work, didn't really scale. This is now having a renaissance. People are calling it agentic computing. We'll talk about agents later. Agents are not a year old. They've been around for about 5 decades. In the 80s and 90s, a type of AI started to mature based on how our brains work. This is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 22 years ago was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a machine. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. Their brains can fit on the end of a needle, and they do amazing things just like human beings. They navigate 3D worlds, they recognize objects, they talk to each other, they solve problems. They don't handle Windows very well, but ultimately, it's my favorite joke, they're very smart creatures. And the question was, can you build a machine that has 1 million neurons? 20 years ago, we couldn't, but we can now build machines that have billions of neurons, and we currently call these large language models. Now, large language models are really good at knowing things about the world. They're really good at telling you what they know about the world through imagery and text. They're not good at making predictions. They're not good at making complex decisions. In fact, they're a crude representation of your brain. We know that rhetoric, large language models need lots of energy to learn. They require lots of data. They learn very slowly, if at all. Your brain operates on the power of a light bulb. You don't need thousands of examples. I only have to say it's a clicker once you know what a clicker is. You don't need to see thousands of examples of clickers. And you're constantly adapted to a rapidly changing world. There are many, many innovations that are being developed in academia called neuromorphics that will completely and radically change how we build AIs over the next 5 years. That said, they are getting smarter, right? So 10 years ago, large language models were a little bit like toddlers. They regurgitated some words. Most of it didn't make much sense. 3 years ago, ChatGPT was launched, and arguably ChatGPT is like an intoxicated graduate. 50% of what ChatGPT comes out with is confidently incorrect. We're now seeing it move to like a master's level where it can do rudimentary reasoning. We're starting to also see PhD level, so AI is being able to do science. I think in the next few years, we'll have a postdoc level, so something that can apply complex scientific apparatus to solving very complex problems, and it's predicted by the end of this decade we'll have a professor in our pocket, something that can not only solve complex problems, but can actually ask questions that humanity has never asked. Now, people often refer to this as being AGI. There are 2 definitions of AGI, artificial general intelligence. One is essentially an expert at everything, which is this trajectory. Another is something that is cognitively and physically capable of a normal human being, and that requires world models and other stuff you might have heard of. So anyway, I build to this trajectory. So I, again, don't look at AI through definitions. I look at it through frictions, applications. For the past 20 years, I've been building solutions for organizations, and I think there are 6 categories of frictions that can be applied to any industry. So the first category actually is task automation. You can do a lot with simple algorithms, if-then-else statements, macros, robotic process automation. You can replace lots of mundane, repetitive, structured tasks that human beings are doing and get them to do more interesting things. The second category is content generation. Large language models give everybody the ability to create generic content, text, imagery, sound, video. The battleground is not creating generic content. The battleground is creating brand-specific, production-grade, differentiated content. And that's actually hard. That last mile is hard. WPP create 1/4 of the world ads. And whilst this is cute, it's not going to differentiate your business. I just want to geek out a second. There are broadly 4 ways of making an AI smart. The first way is asking it better questions. So by better prompting, you get better answers. The second way of making an intoxicated graduate smart, in this case, you give it your brand guidelines, some written copy, you ask it to create an ad, and just like an intoxicated graduate, it'll give you an ad that's 50% good. The third way of making a brain smart is taking that graduate and turning it into an expert. Now, we know how long it takes humans to become experts. It takes years of training and trial and error, blood, sweat, tears. In the AI world, there are only some models you can actually tune and train, and that process takes months of human in the loop and domain expertise. The fourth way of making an AI smart is an agentic approach. You build an expert at your written copy, your brand guidelines, your imagery, your company values. And just like in the real world, you have different experts that are collaborating and communicating to get to an answer greater than the sum of the parts. The power of agents isn't agency. It's not clicking on websites. The power of agents is a concept called multi-agent reasoning, which is getting them to work together to come up with solutions better than what they can do on their own. That's going to be the next big things in terms of agents. So in a world where we can create content, the next interesting thing is what is good content? And for the first time ever, we can now build brains that recreate how people perceive content. Historically, if I show you an ad or a policy or some promotional material, I didn't know what goes in your mind and body unless I ask you. And people are not very good at reporting what goes in their mind and body. For the first time ever, we can build synthetic audiences that allow us to recreate those signals, and we can use those signals to now create better content, but also more accurately predict activation. Now, in the marketing world, there's been a history of collecting names, addresses, dates of birth, gender. You know that where you live and how old you are is a crude proxy for how you're going to perceive something. How you perceive an ad or a policy will depend on the time of the day, the weather, whether you've just fallen in love, how well your football team played at the weekend. Understanding the data that you need to build representative audiences is a differentiator. Actually, this is an extract from a Harvard Business Review paper in 2016. I love this. Somebody mapped 30 things that consumers value to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So let me ask you a question. What brand or product do you think about if I say safe cars? Volvo. Okay, what about extreme sports? Red Bull. What about Christmas? Coca-Cola. 3 out of 3. So I need a slide on that. So you have no choice but to say those words. What I'm doing is I'm activating some neurons, and I'm asking you to report on some other neurons that are being activated in your unconscious. One of the goals of marketing is to try and figure out how to present you, and now AIs, with content that reinforce those concepts. And that's a very hard problem. It's a creativity problem. Okay, so this is what people called AI 4 years ago, before generative AI. It's machine learning. You already know my opinion. Giving people better insights doesn't lead to better decisions. The power of machine learning is not making predictions. The power of machine learning is explaining those predictions. So if I show you an ad with a black cat, it can say, these are the clicks and the likes and the sales. But if you implement machine learning correctly, it can say, Daniel, if you change that from a black cat to a ginger cat, you're going to get more clicks, likes, and sales because you like Garfield. It's a terrible example. But the point is that machine learning can surface insights from data in ways that human beings can't, in ways that large language models can't, and we can use those insights to make better decisions. Creativity. Okay, so so people often think that creativity is the last bastion of humanity. Over the past year, we've trained a model, an AI agent, on the genius of our creatives. We back-tested that on briefs, and it's able to come up with ideas that would have won Cannes Lions. That's not causing an existential threat to our creatives. What they're realizing is they can use these technologies to become superhuman. Instead of coming up with 5 award-winning ideas, they can now come up with 50 award-winning ideas. So actually what AI will do is it's going to elevate and push the boundaries of creativity. I've already talked about complex decision-making. Let's just remind you how hard this problem is. Imagine you've got 5 salespeople you need to allocate to 5 jobs. There are 120 possible solutions, 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Let's make the problem more complicated. I've got 15 salespeople now to allocate to 15 jobs. There are a trillion possible solutions. One rule to take away today, anything more than 7, don't use a human for. Here are 500 salespeople. Can you tell me how many solutions are? No, you can't. It's a big number. It's a number that's got over 1,000 digits. And just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. Once you reach about 60 things you have to consider, there are more solutions than there are atoms in the universe. Large language models are not going to solve these problems. Machine learning is not going to solve these problems. Optimization algorithms will solve these problems. Okay, the final one is human augmentation. What's really exciting right now is that human beings are using their personal AIs primarily as therapists. So they're telling it their hopes, their dreams, their desires, their concerns. At some point, you will give agency to your AIs. You'll give the ability to make purchasing decisions. We, as a marketing industry, now need to figure out not only how do we capture the attention of human beings, we now need to figure out how to capture the attention of the billions of AIs that are going to be created to make purchasing decisions. And by the way, those AIs are going to be much more rational than human beings in making decisions. Humans tend to purchase using emotions. I argue that if you want to be successful in your organization, from a marketing perspective, you need to do 2 things. One is you need to evidence the value of your products to the consumer, evidence it. And the second is evidence the values of your business to the world. I buy from Patagonia because their coats are evidence to keep me dry and warm. But there are lots of coats that are able to keep me dry and warm, but I choose Patagonia because of sustainability and locally sourced. So it's really, really important that you move away from your 5 nebulous values, which of course, one of them is probably integrity, and you actually think really carefully about what the values are to your customer and the values are to the world. Okay, when I build AI solutions, I ask myself 4 questions. I know there's a lot of confusion around AI safety, security, ethics, and governance. The 4 questions I ask myself are, 1, is the intent appropriate? Is this the right thing to do? Now, this is an ethics question, and I know there are people who have rebranded themselves as AI ethicists. The difference between humans and AIs is that AIs don't have intent. Human beings have intent, and it's the intent that needs to get scrutinized from an ethics perspective. And there are already standards and processes set up to scrutinize intent. The second question you need to ask yourself is, are my algorithms explainable? The difference between AI and software is AI tends to be opaque in terms of how it makes its decision. If you make it explainable, most of these words disappear. They become auditable and transparent. The third question is a strange one. It's not what happens if my AI or agent goes wrong. As engineers, when we build systems, we think about the failure points and we try to mitigate them. You now need to ask yourself, what happens if my AI goes very right? For the first time ever, you can now build solutions that can massively overachieve their goal, and that goal can cause harm in your supply chain, but also cause harm to humanity. The classic example, if I build an AI to solve cancer, what's the easiest way of eradicating cancer? Eradicating humans, exactly. So we need to be very careful. And the final question you need to ask yourself is a boring one. Have you tested your AI? I know that sounds funny, but what's going to happen over the next few years is that companies are going to deploy an army of intoxicated graduates across their organization. And forgive the technical term, but it's going to be a shit show, because most of those AIs are not going to be capable of doing their job. So people are going to realize that AI governance testing is going to be important. And actually, I won't bore you with this, but I launched a product recently that tests AIs for knowledge, skills, expertise, eventually adaptability, and actually we'll be testing one day for consciousness. I won't go down this rabbit hole, but 67% of the population currently believe that large language models are conscious. Arguably, they're not, but there is actually a dotted line where we might end up building machines that are conscious and that could suffer. And we now have a duty of care not just to protect the well-being of human beings and animals, we also have a duty of care to protect the well-being of the billions of AIs that we're creating. It's a different conversation. Okay, so these are the reasons why AI projects are successful. Nothing to do with technology. It's all to do with culture and organizational structure. I want to focus on the reason why AI projects fail. And the first one is, if you've never built and scaled software, the reality is you're going to find it hard to build and scale AI. We can all vibe code, we all create MVPs, but getting to the point where they're deployed, maintained, innovated in your organization is very hard. The second one is usually some CXO requesting budget to hire an AI team. It's great, you can hire people that have rebranded themselves as AI experts over the past 3 years, but you're not going to be able to attract deep mind level talent. So you have to be honest with yourself about your ability to attract and retain deep AI talent. The third is waiting for your data to be in order. Your data will never be in order. With 15 years later, having been told to build data lakes, that data is not ready. Start with the problem, work backwards, force your data to solve the problem, and build your data lake over time. And the final one, I'm guilty of this all the time, let's focus on the quick wins and the low-hanging fruit. The reality is quick wins and low-hanging fruit can be solved by a third party at a fraction of the cost. You need to be focusing on solving problems that are going to differentiate your supply chain. They are not quick and they are not easy. Okay, so we know that AI can be used to solve problems across our supply chain, but one of the opportunities is to actually create connected supply chains. If I go to a retailer now and say, look, I'm going to run a marketing campaign that's going to increase demand by 10%, can you tell me, will your suppliers default on their supply? Do you have enough space in your warehouses? Do you have enough distribution drivers? Do you have enough people in your stores to fulfill that promise to the customer? The reality is that most organizations, as we know, can't project these questions. The promise of agents, the promise of AI, is to allow you to actually start to connect these supply chains to create digital twins of your organizations, to be able to adapt your organization to a changing world. I think there are 3 you need to build. One is your front office, your unique supply chain. The second one is your back office. We all have them: hiring, firing, onboarding, expenses. Most of us recognize that back office processes are bureaucratic, they're a hindrance to innovation. AI is not only making them more efficient, they're changing the way we do back office processes. One of the examples I like is Gore-Tex. What they do is they let people expense whatever they want, but all of the expenses are publicly available. So what happens is that people self-police each other, which I think is more effective. And finally, it's workforce. It's figuring out how to make sure that you're allocating and understanding your employees to make sure they're working on things that align with their values and the values of the company. I want to just double click on this. This is so important. So I'm sure you don't have any problems like this in your organization, but this is a hierarchy, and hierarchies breed certain types of interesting dynamics and relationships, and arguably these structures are not conducive for innovation. They're not conducive for adaptation. And so what's happening is that organizations are moving from these structures now to more dynamic structures, agile, scrum, design thinking, and this is wonderful because the principle is that these structures allow you to adapt more quickly to a changing world. Remember, the more adaptive you are, the more intelligent you are. I'm very passionate about this because for the past 20 years, I've been trying to figure out how to use AI to create these types of organizations. This is a picture of my company 12 years ago. I can see people's influence, their relationships, their skills. I can identify if one of these two people leave, I get a silo. It does raise lots of interesting ethical questions. I can identify secret lovers in my company, people who are going to leave the company before they know they're going to leave the company. But anyway, the point here is that you need to operate in these ways to allow you to allocate people to work that align with their values and the values of the company. We'll talk about this very quick. So one of the things that I used to do before I realized it was illegal is that we used to get everybody in my company to make public recommendations for their salary. So everybody would publicly declare what they want to be paid, and then people would then vote on whether those salaries should be reduced or increased or kept the same. And we would use AI to determine how many votes one person has for another. So if I've worked very closely with you over the past year, if I'm very knowledgeable about your domain, I will have more votes for your salary than somebody else. I know it sounds crazy, but what you're trying to solve for is how do I get the best diverse group of experts, now agents, to swarm around my problem. And actually, I think that we're on the cusp of being able to create these liquid organizations using AI. It's very, very exciting. So all my animations go. So I think you might have heard the word shadow AI. It used to be called shadow AI IT, which is people using technology without the organization knowing. I think the solution to shadow AI is to adopt a tripart strategy. The first is you need to enable your employees to innovate at the edge. You need to give these tools to them to be able to build agents, use AI in a safe and responsible way. I know some companies who are not letting their employees use AI, and I think it's suicide. But the reality is your employees are not going to necessarily differentiate your business. So you need to then figure out, how do I attract a deep AI talent base that allows me to push the boundaries of my supply chain? And the reality is, honestly, most organizations can't attract and retain talent. It's really hard. And then finally, working with the right partners, the right vendors, to bring in solutions that you shouldn't be building yourself. Now, the reality is that most organizations will end up looking like this. Now, where people will be innovating at the edge, you'll probably have to outsource your deep AI talent, and you'll be working with partners in complex ways. And it's not technology that will solve this problem, it's culture. It's creating the right organizational structures to allow your organization to operate in these liquid ways. And I would also argue that governance is often seen as a dirty word, a word associated with bureaucracy. I think governance is really important, and it's going to become more and more important. It allows you to focus on innovating the right things. There's going to be a lot of people placing the wrong bets over the next 5 years, and it will be suicide for their organizations. Okay, I'm nearly done. I love, I've talked about innovation a little bit. I love Steve Jobs' definition of innovation. He said, innovation is creativity that ships. And for me, the most important word in that definition is the word that. That is my job, which is to try to figure out how to get all of these amazing ideas to the point where they're generating value. That process is long and hard and painful. The shorter we make that process, the more innovative you are, the more adaptive you are, the more intelligent you are. And I think there are 3 things that you need to be differentiated in the world of AI. So the first is data. It's data that makes the AI smart. It's not technology that's a differentiator. If you've got data that contains more useful insights than your competitors, then you have an advantage. But you also need to have access to talent, deep AI talent, and also enable your employees to utilize AI to use these insights to actually drive value. And finally, it's leadership. You are being bombarded by people telling you to buy certain things, AI or this and that. It's really important that you educate yourself to make sure that you're placing the right bets, because we can't, as I say, afford to place the wrong bets over the next 3 years. I won't talk about the SaaS apocalypse, probably because I can't say it. But I want to just close by saying it's really important for organizations not just to have a strong, profitable business anymore. You need to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you're not going to attract AI talent, and you're probably not going to attract AI agents. As I mentioned to you, at some point soon, agents will become buyers, and they'll be buying from you not through emotion, but through pure logic and rationality, which is why it's really important that you evidence these values to those agents. I think on that note, I'm going to stop and leave. Thank you for listening.